Panning.
Oh, wait.
Her breast. Well,
He's not normal. Oh, seriously, I actually saw
Let
the
me-
TV.
Pearl Harbor. It matters. Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a day that will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Those words were given by President Roosevelt on December 8, 1941, the day after Pearl Harbor was attacked. The United States would not soon forget what happened that day. Today, we will see what events led to this attack, the attack itself, and what we can learn from it. We will start with the events leading up to the attack. The difficulties with Japan started in October of 1940, when the United States adopted policies called the 8-Action Memo, designed to interfere with Japanese Pacific trade practices. According to Day of Deceit by Robert Stinnett, the 8 actions included telling the Dutch that they were not allowed to give the Japanese certain trade goods, specifically oil, and banning all trade between the U.S. and Japanese entirely. These sanctions caused the Japanese to become angry, and they began planning the attack on Pearl Harbor. Warnings of the future attack were received twice in January of 1941. Both warnings were unheeded. Even though these warnings were disregarded, the U.S. implemented a message decoding program in April of 1941 codenamed MAGIC. Although this was a very effective program, it would do no good. On September 24, 1941, the Japanese requested a layout of Pearl Harbor and were given it. The commanding officers of the Pacific Fleet, Kimmel and Short, were not warned about Japanese interests, and the Japanese continued their preparations for the attack. On November 16th and 26th, 1941, Japanese forces left their home for Hawaii. I would now like to take a look at the attack itself. On the evening of December 6th, 1941, a message was decoded in Washington, D.C. that stated an attack was imminent. It was forwarded to Washington High Command 4 hours before the attack, but was not forwarded to the Pacific until after the attack was over. All of America was unaware. Admiral Nagumo of the Japanese fleet launched the first wave of 183 planes to Oahu at 06:10 a.m. on December 7th, reaching their target at 07:40 a.m., according to an article from Pearl Harbor Survivors Association. At 07:49 a.m., Commander Fuchida gave the order to begin the attack. The Japanese were merciless. They bombed Battleship Row with nearly all of the ships anchored. They bombed the airfields, which, because it was a Sunday, meant that all aircraft and equipment were in their hangars. Many of the nurses and medical personnel began to run to the hospitals, only to be killed before they got there. Finally, after 3 hours of relentless bombing and shooting, the terrible ordeal ended at approximately 11:00 a.m. Many decisions were made immediately following the attack. At 12:30, the military raided the Japanese embassy on Oahu to find diplomats and staff burning incriminating documents. Consequently, the Army ordered a blackout to go into effect after dark, and at 16:25, or 4:25, martial law was implemented, giving the U.S. military full control. According to HistoryPlace.com, 2,335 servicemen and 68 civilians were killed, with 1,178 wounded. Over 1,000 servicemen who lost their lives were killed on this ship, the USS Arizona alone. The Japanese damaged 18 seacraft, including sinking 5 battleships, and destroyed 188 aircraft. Due to the magnitude of the offense, on December 8th, President Roosevelt declared war on the Empire of Japan, officially entering the U.S. into World War II. The world would never be the same. This leads me to discuss what these events mean for us today. These events mean that we can have a greater respect for the sacrifice of our predecessors. Without the sacrifice of their time, when the U.S. entered the war, we would not have had the equipment or labor force needed to complete the war. According to the United States Bureau of the Census, Bicentennial Edition, the total labor force in the U.S. increased from 58,000 to 66,000 during the war. They also sacrificed material possessions to help the war effort, but most importantly, we cannot forget the sacrifice of life. In all, 418,500 people lost their lives during the war. That is greater than the city population of Minneapolis, Minnesota. These events can also serve to show us how people can be brought together. The Pearl Harbor attack and consequent entrance into the war brought Americans closer together. But it also brought the world closer together in that it combined many nations against a common enemy, evil. I also believe that these events brought people closer to God. In the October 1st, 2001 edition of the Las Vegas Business Press, University of Nevada, Las Vegas sociology professor Donald Carnes says this: "When we feel alone as in a tragedy, people always turn to God, no matter what religion." These events also teach us an important lesson about greed and its power. In Proverbs 28:25, it says, "A greedy man stirs up dissension, but he who trusts in the Lord will prosper." NIV. Greed leads to discord among people as well as governments. Power-hungry men and women cause great havoc among their fellow leaders. This then leads to the tearing apart of countries and people groups. Greed is a powerful thing. During this speech, we have covered a lot of ground. We have seen events that led to the Pearl Harbor attack, seen the devastation of the attack itself, and we also saw how something that happened so many years ago can still teach us about life today. I would like to leave you with these words from President Roosevelt. "I assert that we will not only defend ourselves to the uttermost, but will make it very certain that this form of treachery shall never again endanger us. Hostilities exist. With confidence in our armed forces, with the unbounding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph. So help us God."